Hello everyone, in this video we're going to be looking at the rectangle tool in Inkscape, and you'll see that it's the 4th item down in the tool ribbon down the left hand side. You can see there when you point at it, it says you can create rectangles and squares with it, and you turn it on by either clicking this button or, as the shortcut listed there in parentheses says, the R key on your keyboard. So if you just point at a location on your keyboard, let's say I had the selector tool. If you just hit the R key, it'll switch to the rectangle tool, and then you can begin clicking down and dragging on the canvas. Now when I click down and I start dragging, like I mentioned in the previous video, I can hold down Control and it'll maintain its proportions and it'll be square. If I let off a Control, then I can change the aspect ratio. But if I hold down Control and start dragging, you'll see that it maintains the proportions as long as I'm going somewhere in the 45-degree area. If I get outside of that 45-degree zone, it starts changing. Now if you want it to draw from the center out in all four directions, you hold down Control and Shift, and then you can drag down and to the right and you'll get a perfect square. So that's why it's called the square/rectangle tool. You can draw, well, it's called a rectangle tool, but you can draw rectangles and squares with it very easily. Once you get it drawn, you can just hit your S key on your keyboard, or you can come up here and click the selector tool and it will grab your selector. Now there are some things about this this tool. I'm going to delete that one that we have on the screen because I want to draw another one to show you this next part. I'm going to draw a perfect square here, and I'm just going to let off, and when you first draw it you have these two squares, one at each corner of the upper left and the lower right hand corner, and then you have this circle that are on the rectangle. Now these, if you control and drag on them, they basically do the same thing as the other ones. They basically allow you to move to change the size of the square. These are the definition points because it basically, a square or a rectangle has opposite sides of the same length, so when you draw one you really only need the starting upper left hand corner and the ending right lower hand corner. That's really the only two pieces of information you need to draw a rectangle, is the starting point, the ending point, and really what length each of these pairs of sides needs to be. Now this circle up here, this allows you to do something to the way the rectangle looks. You've probably seen these rectangles with rounded corners. Well, that's what this does. If you click and drag this, it will allow you to put a rounded corner on it, and you can just drag it down. Now the amount that you drag it down determines how round the corners are going to be, and you can drag it all the way down to the point where it becomes almost a circle. It's still a rectangle because there's a little bit of a straight side here, but you get the idea. If we were to go back to the selector tool here, just by hitting S and then select it, and I scaled this up, it still scales up, but it's still got that flat edge on it. So now I'm using the selector tool, but if I want to go back to the node tool, which is basically the tool that allows you to put the rounded edges on it, I can just either come up here and click the tool, or if you notice there, it has an N on it, so that means that's the hotkey or the shortcut key. So if I'm working with one tool and I want to go to the node tool, I just hit the N on my keyboard, and now I'm in node mode. So you can fine-tune these corners that we put on this rectangle earlier, you can fine-tune those with that node tool. Now, there's another way that you can set the sizing on this rectangle. And if I come up here to the selector tool and click it, you'll see we have the X and the Y. That basically tells you where the upper left-hand corner is of the object. I believe it's the upper left-hand corner. Yeah, it's the upper left-hand corner. It tells you where that corner is. Now in this case, the corner isn't on the object, it's on the bounding box, but you get the idea. You can set this, if I wanted this to be in the upper left-hand corner of the page, I could just set this to 0, 0 by filling in the X and Y on these, and see how it puts it up there in the upper left-hand corner. Now let's say I wanted to make this a certain size rectangle, and let's say I wanted to make it a square. Well, you can do that too with these settings up here in the control bar. If you select the object you want to work on and you unlock the aspect ratio, let's say we want to make this 300 wide and 300 tall. You can set those explicitly using these value fields up here. Then let's say I wanted to keep this a square and I don't want to mess up the aspect ratio, you could lock the aspect ratio back, and now when you scale this up and down, it will keep its aspect ratio. So that is how you work with the scaling and setting the dimensions and the location using the control bar. There's some other things that you can do with the control bar up here, but many of them apply to things that don't really make sense for a square. For example, we'll just go through some of these. Let's say I'm going to create another one of these by hitting Control and D. I'm going to change the color of that one to green. Let me go to the fill, just move this into the green hue, and that's awfully bright, so I'm going to turn that down. Okay, so now we have two rectangles. One's red and one's green. If I turn the green one off, you'll see the red one's underneath it. Let's just offset it a little bit so you can see what happens here. These buttons up here, and actually we should probably have another one too to demonstrate this. This other one, let's make it blue. We'll just go with RGB, the 3 color channels that you have to have on a computer to make every color. Okay, so now we have red, green, and blue. And let's say we wanted to change how these are stacked, because we have the blue on top, then the green's in the middle, and the red's on the bottom. Let's say we wanted to push the blue to the bottom. We would just click the blue one, and then see this button right here that has the green arrow with the highlighted layer all the way at the bottom. If we hit that, the blue's going to go back behind the red one. Actually, that just pushes it down one. But if you... Oh, actually it is. It's below the red one too. You just can't see it. Should have probably put them like that. So this button pushes it all the way to the bottom. The other one, with the line all the way on the top, raises it back to the top. So these two buttons put it all the way at the top or all the way at the bottom. These other two buttons, if you click one, they take it one direction or one level down in the direction that the green arrow points. So if we want to put the green one under the blue one, we just click this, and that lowers the selection one step. We want to bring the red one up above the green one, we just select it, and this one will bring it up a step. So you get the idea there. You can, if you're working on a composition and you've got multiple shapes that you're using and you want to stack them in a certain order, these buttons up here allow you to do that. Another thing that you can do with those buttons, it's going to be hard to see on this. Maybe if I put a gradient on this, you'll be able to see it a little better. Let's make this full opacity, and we'll put a gradient on the blue one, and that'll help us to see what's happening here. So this one, these buttons right here, they allow you to change, well, flip it. You can flip this horizontally and there's no change because the gradient stays the same if you flip it horizontally. But if we flip it vertically, watch what happens. See, it just flipped it in place like it was. Now if I rotate this 90 degrees and then we flip it horizontally, you can see the effect. So basically that's what these buttons do. You can, this rotates, right? It rotates at 90 degrees each time you click it. This one rotates it the other way, 90 degrees each time you click it. You get the idea. These buttons are easy ways to basically do the same thing as, like, you can stack these over here in your layer panel too just by dragging them around, which is what I find myself doing quite a bit. I'll just stack the order over here in the layers panel instead of using these buttons up here, but you can use the buttons if that's what you prefer. So you've got these things, which are, these are more, right? That selects everything in all layers. This button selects all objects. They pretty much do the same thing in this case, but, and then let's see, did I miss one? This one deselects. So if you have everything here, you can deselect all of them with that one. And this one, I don't use this one much at all. So what that does is, let me see if I can just demonstrate this here. So this toggles on how your selector, because we're in the selector tool, right? We have a certain object selected, but we're using the selector tool. And this changes the way the selector tool works in this case. Let's say I wanted to select the green and the blue. Let's say I wanted to select the green and the blue squares. Right now, with this turned off, in order to select both of these, I have to drag all the way around both of them. And then I can select them. In order to select all three of these, I would have to start way out here and select all of these just by dragging my selector around all three, and then it selects them. If you turn this on, it changes the way that works. Now all I got to do is touch all of them. I can just start there and just touch all three of these, and now they're all selected. So it changes the sensitivity of your selector tool. And I never use that I never use this while it's turned on. I always use it while it's turned off because this seems to be more deliberate for me. If I want to, and of course you can select all three of these just by clicking each one and holding down your shift key while you click them, and that will allow you to specifically select all of them. But this tool is a very handy tool, and if you like the idea of being able to select multiple objects just by touching them, then that's something you want to turn on. So that is basically, well, we didn't cover these buttons out here, but that's a topic for maybe a little bit later in another video. We won't get into all of those, but for the most part, that's what all these buttons do. These have to do with the way the shape behaves, right? If you just point at them, it'll tell you what they do. When scaling objects, scale the stroke width by the same proportion. This one, scale the radii of rounded corners, right? With that on. They're all on by default, so it's going to act a certain way. Move gradients in fill and stroke. They have to do with what happens when you resize shapes, and they have defaults. They have defaults on them already, and like for example, this gradient, with that turned on, when I scale this, the gradient changes too, so it looks the same up here as it does when it's small, right? And they're all turned on, but if I turn that gradient one off, watch what happens when I scale this. See how the gradient doesn't change with the, see now it's almost a solid color. That's because the gradient, if I go to my gradient tool, see the gradient stayed the same size that it was, but the shape changed. And that's really what all three of those buttons do. Like, see now if I scale this back up with that turned off, I'll get my gradient back as soon as I let off. And now if I turn this back on, the gradient will change with the shape, which is what you want a lot of times. So that's why that's the default. And that's why I didn't want to get into all of this, because most people aren't going to use that feature. Some people might, like if you're drawing and you're drawing it really small and then you want to expand it up, you might want to maintain the, and see, we don't, do I even, yeah, I have a stroke on this. Watch what happens if I turn this off. Let me scale this way down. So my stroke is set to, what is it set? It's set to, let's set it to 1 just to get a nice even. So the stroke is set to 1, but watch what happens if I turn this off. If I turn that off and then I blow this up and then let off, see how the stroke didn't change? It's the same size it was before. It's still at 1. The default is to have that turned on. So watch what happens to the stroke when I scale this up now. See how the stroke got fatter? That's basically what these 4 buttons do. They either allow or disallow certain parts of the shape to scale with the shape. And sometimes you might want this turned off when you're scaling up because you don't want that stroke to get any bigger. You want it to be that size. It works the same way if I have it set to a thin stroke up here and then I scale this down. Now what happens is it becomes smaller than it was. So that's what these buttons do. One's for the stroke, one's for the radii, so that's the corners here. We're working with rounded corners on this rectangle, and it's set so that when you scale this up, you get these scale too. You may have worked with other programs that don't have that setting, and what happens is something that looks good down here, like let's make this look nice and even like that, and then we'll turn off this, we'll turn off that, and watch what happens to this when I scale it up. Or actually, watch what happens when I make it wider. So see, they didn't scale. They stayed the same size. But if I go and I change that back, if I go and change that, change the radii back, watch what happens when I stretch this. See how it's disformed or disfigured. You may not want that. So when you go to do that stretch, if you stretch it with this button turned off, it'll keep your rounded corners looking the same, so it won't stretch the corners. And then the last one, so we talked about gradient, we talked about the stroke, we talked about the rounded corners, and the last one is patterns, which that's the main reason why I didn't want to get into this, because we don't have a pattern on this, and that's enough for a whole new video. I have a video on patterns, 2 different ways to make patterns on this channel, so I'm not going to get into what that does. But if you had a pattern on this and you had this turned off, it would scale the pattern or not scale the pattern depending on if it was selected. So that's basically the control bar and how you use it and the rectangle tool to draw rectangles and squares in Inkscape. And just another reminder that I support this channel by the sales of my designs on marketplaces. I don't have memberships. I do these demonstrations and just put them out there publicly, and so I don't require a membership. I don't have a Patreon or anything like that. I just support this channel based on the sales of my designs in the marketplaces that are listed in the description of these videos. So if you see a design that you like and you would like to support the channel, feel free to do it by those means. I hope that helps, and thanks for watching.